lies with facts. Save our democracy from right-wing hypocrisy. Keep our integrity, embrace our diversity. Whenever we're down, we always come back. So listen up, Democrats.
A weekly engagement broadcast on progressive issues in Oregon. I'm your host, Larry Taylor. Today's show, we will start with a weekly update, although there's not much news, so that'll be short. Today we have three guests from our neighbor state, Washington, Supreet Kaur from Our Revolution, and then two candidates for Congress, Sarah Smith and Dorothy Gasque. And then we'll do questions and answers and then upcoming events. So the big news this week was the release of the delegates, the number of delegates that each county in Oregon will be able to send to the platform convention in 2018. That's coming up in March. People who have never seen the numbers were a little bit shocked because they are based on the population of each county. The main thing to remember is that the deadline for counties to notify the Democratic Party of Oregon of their delegates that it will be sending is February 14th. If you go to the slide with the graph, you show why people are shocked. So this is a graph showing how many delegates each county gets to send to the convention. Multnomah County, I think the largest population, has the ability to send 269 delegates. And the next largest county is Washington County, which has about 123 delegates or so. So you can see that if everyone was to fill all their slots, the fourth largest counties would pretty much dictate the agenda. And that may be one of the reasons why the agenda is so urban-oriented as opposed to taking into consideration the issues of rural counties. If you can see how it tapers off, all those counties on the left, starting with Curry County, get 2 delegates each. There's a couple of counties with 3 delegates, and then there's a smattering in the middle. But in the past, the counties have not filled all of their delegate slots, so anyone who's interested in going could pretty much show up, sign up, and be sent. We expect that to be different this year just because, or in 2018, just because everyone is now very much interested in what's going on. So if you are interested in going to the platform convention, make sure that you contact the county party and find out their process for electing delegates. Each county has their own snowflake unique process for getting in. Some of them just do sign-up sheets. Some of them actually elect delegates. So if you'd like to go, there's, and certainly in the larger counties, it's quite possible you'll be able to attend. I've talked about this in the past, and I'm going to be doing a short PSA later today and putting it on our Facebook page on what the convention is if you're more interested in how the weekend will flow and why you would want to attend. So today we have 3 guests from Washington. Originally, I didn't think there would be a reason to pull them in, but as we got to talk to them, we found out that we're having similar issues in both states that are actually kind of funny if they weren't so tragic. So our first guest today is Supreet Kaur, who is with Our Revolution, King County. Welcome, Supreet.
Thank you for having me, Larry. Hi.
Thank you for being here. So tell us about your group and what you're doing.
So we are a fairly new group, but what we want to do in the Northwest is form a coalition, learning from the movements before us, build a movement for the moment that is about to come. And my belief is we do that by forming a coalition with Greens, progressives, socialists, independents on issues that we care about. Educating the community on solutions, not just the problems that we have, because it's so many times it's so easy to mislead the community. But the media does that when they have vested interests. The politicians do that. When the populace is educated, that's when the democracy does best. So that is our plan here in the Pacific Northwest: form a coalition across the West Coast, bring together these groups on different issues, and get some. And educate the community on these issues and the solutions that we can propose. Now, the way we want to do it is like I thought of having a convention, a summit every month on different issues. Our first one that we are going to have is on homelessness. We are going to have an advocacy summit, a town hall for progressive democracy, and talk about what we have done so far locally, nationally, globally, what has been working, what are the problems that the activists face when they try to solve, when they try to help their comrades on the streets. So that's the first step, educating the populace. The next one, we're hoping we can have these conventions every month. This is the first one. We'll see how it goes. We'll see what the response of the community is. And the next one is going to hopefully be in February on ending wars. And we're going to take it from there, and one issue at a time, and talk about it. Bring in people who have been doing work in that area to talk about it. But
if you end wars, how will the American economy survive?
Yeah, that is a problem. We need to diversify. We need to. So my idea of the military is we need to have a humanitarian military. Let's have it, and let's actually do good work. Let's help with a disaster relief in poor countries. Let us help build solar panels in poor countries. Let us recognize that we are part of the same species. We share the earth with other animals. Recognize that and work and sustainably work towards creating an earth that is good for all of us, and not just colonize the entire planet and space beyond.
So if I wanted to join your group, how would I do that?
Oh, we have so you can go to our Revolution National page, and they have all the groups listed. Ours is a recognized group, so it'll be one of that. Or you can go on to our Facebook page, Our Revolution King County, and there's a sign up button on there.
Excellent. And I have some details about the town hall and homelessness later in the program, and we can talk about it again for
absolutely
who might want to join.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Should I go ahead and fill it in now? About the event?
Nice. Why don't you go ahead and tell us the details?
Okay. So now one we are having in January is on January 13. It is called Town Hall for Progressive Democracy, Housing and Homelessness. Tickets can be found on our Facebook page and on Eventbrite. Uphill Media is our media partner, and we have a fantastic panel. Our keynote speaker is Timothy Harris. He's the founder of Real Change News Network that has done great work in the area of homelessness. And we have representatives from Democratic Socialists of America in Seattle. We have Sarah Smith on our panel. We're going to have Stop the Sweeps, which is very active in the Seattle area, doing direct action work with the homeless, with the houseless. And we have caseworkers, veterans. And I think this is going to be a very, very power-packed panel. And I hope
if I'm a Microsoft millionaire and I had spare money to throw at you, how would I donate to your cause so you can put on that great event?
Yep, you can go to Eventbrite and buy a donation ticket. That would be great.
Is
if you're
it?
Do not put in money.
I got $1 million.
It's not going to be good for you.
I would encourage all Microsoft and Amazon millionaires to donate to this great cause.
You want to help us end homelessness.
Why don't we go to our next guest, which is Dorothy Gasque. Welcome, Dorothy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you. We first met week before last at the Working Families Christmas Gala, which was a very interesting event.
Yeah.
And at the event, you were telling me about some of the interesting things going on. So why don't we start with your involvement with politics and where you live and what you're running for. So let's give us the fascinating background behind you.
All right. Well, so I've been a political activist for several years, but I started organizing when Bernie Sanders announced in 2015 and became the lead grassroots organizer in Southwest Washington for his campaign. And then from there, trying to keep this momentum of this political revolution going, I jumped into the race to run for Congress in 2018 to represent Southwest Washington.
And you had some interesting stats on how many, on the percentage of votes that Bernie got in the primary.
But it's the caucus. We caucus.
Yeah.
So we took the 3rd congressional district with 80.8% of the vote.
That's
standard. So it's one of the highest.
I actually attended one of the caucus meetings over in Longview, and because I'd never experienced the caucus system, and I wanted to see how it worked. And yeah, it was pretty funny because they would break up into the groups, and then people would talk for their candidates, and so they would go around the circle, and the first one to talk about Bernie, and the second one to talk about Bernie, and the third one to talk about Bernie, and then the fourth one to talk about Bernie. And then we finally came across, no, someone said, so is there anyone here that's supporting Hillary? And this one poor delegate or caucus member said, I'm supporting Hillary, but I feel like I brought a knife to a gunfight. And then, it was astonishing to see the overwhelming support for Bernie Sanders. It was even greater than it was here in Portland.
Yeah, in a lot of places we even doubled caucus turnout over the 2008 record. So we brought a whole lot of people into the process who had never participated before. It was pretty amazing.
That was what was so exciting about being there, because it was clearly a lot of new energy, and it wasn't the party stalwarts who have been doing this for decades, but people were actually getting involved and coming out, which was one of the huge benefits we saw of the Sanders campaign.
Yes.
So you have an opponent in this election.
Well, I have lots of opponents in this election, but we're an open primary, so everyone will be on the same ballot regardless of party affiliation. So even the incumbent has to run against all of us in the primary.
Oh, is it top two?
Yes, top two.
So you have an open primary. You've got numerous opponents, and then in the fall, the top two will have a runoff.
Yes.
Interesting. And so you have your incumbent, who apparently probably is running again, and then you have Democrats running against you as well.
Yes.
How many Democrats do you have running against you?
So there's 4 of us total. There's 2 apparent frontrunners, I guess, on the Democratic side. The newest candidate who jumped into the race, the entire political establishment is getting behind her and trying to pressure everyone else to get behind her. But we've been extremely successful in building our campaign here. We have more than 120 identified volunteers and more than 1,600 donors. But the establishment keeps trying to tell people we're non-viable when we've been the front runner for months. It's actually rather insulting.
What did you do to piss them off?
I organized the political revolution, and so we've replaced a lot of people in the party, and they bullied a lot of people that we brought in, a lot of young people we brought in. They bullied them out of the party. So here at our local county meetings, I don't even like to walk into that room. It's not a fun place to be. But when I go to meetings outside of the county, because we have 7 counties in this district. So when I go to meetings outside of Clark County, it's a whole different attitude. People are welcoming and nice, and it's great, and I love it. But here in Clark County, they just cannot let go.
That's very interesting. So the newest candidate you referred to moved to the county from Oregon. So one of ours is up and is now an opponent of you, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a big mistake to put all their power behind somebody who's, essentially carpetbagging. She doesn't, while she has connections to the political establishment, she's not known in the community in general because she's not here, volunteering at our nonprofits and organizing in our community. She just works here. And it seems weird to me. I wouldn't think if I crossed the river and worked in Portland, I wouldn't think that I should go and run for office in Portland.
And what's most curious is how she surfaced to be the establishment candidate, because I've been involved in the Democratic Party of Oregon for 21 years or so, and I'm not familiar with her. So she's not been around this group. So I don't think the Democratic Party of Oregon exported one of our people, and especially when we are searching desperately for candidates to run for seats down here. Um, there's a very interesting story in there, which I wish someone would find out, on how she showed up to be a candidate in a race.
Yeah, well, it looks like she made the decision herself, and she's been active in things here locally on the political side. Oddly enough, someone had mentioned, one of the other candidates in the race had mentioned serving on the Port of Vancouver Citizens Advisory Board with her. And the first thing that came to my mind was, wait, you don't actually have to be a citizen to sit on the advisory board. It's just, the whole thing just seems so weird to me. And, but the part where they're just completely disrespecting the grassroots and the grassroots energy that we have brought to the party by telling people we're non-viable, and not ever even having sat down and asked me, what was happening in the campaign, what we were doing, and what kind of voter contact we were going to be able to achieve. They never asked any of those questions. All they're doing is looking at an FEC report, so they're not seeing the volunteer energy, and they're not going to see all those small donations because they're not itemized.
Yeah, it must drive them crazy, because they're so used to scouring the contribution forms and finding out who the big are, and then going after their money. And I know if you look at our contributions to the Progressive Oregon organization, 99% of them are well under $100, so no one's names are listed. But I enter all their names into the system in case they ever go over the $100 limit, and we keep it legal. It's been fascinating talking to Washington, because I always thought that our problems here in Oregon were unique, and then we find out that the problems that you're having with the Washington Party is very similar to the ones that we're experiencing here in the Democratic Party of Oregon.
Yeah, I think it's a national problem. It's a lot. It's this whole level of elitism, and it's really starting to become very frustrating, very insulting. Like, I'm a combat veteran. And not just like any kind of combat veteran. Like, I was a non-commissioned officer. I led combat patrols and, managed like base security. And so I have leadership experience and battle-tested leadership experience. On top of that, of being a very successful grassroots organizer. I mean, building this movement here in Southwest Washington that got Bernie 80.8% of the vote. I ran as a national delegate and received the most votes out of anybody. And so I have this success story, but they don't want to acknowledge that. But when I'm out campaigning, and if I'm talking to Republicans, I don't get that same disrespect. If I tell them I'm a combat veteran, then immediately their attitude changes, and they're willing to have that conversation with me, as opposed to the Democratic Party leadership, which is very dismissive. Like, I don't know what exactly they expect to do in this blue collar district, trying to run someone with fancy college degrees, but no real work experience, like labor experience.
And the messaging is also very strange, because if there was anything that I got out of what happened last year, was that there are people who feel that the Democratic Party is not paying attention to their issues. And, we listen to the Democrats in Congress go to negotiate over the budget, and, their number one issue is the Dreamers, which is very, very important, but that just illustrates that they're missing the core issues that are facing Americans and keeping us back from achieving the just your basic lifestyle that we come to expect here in our country.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we have the worst income inequality that we've seen since the Great Depression, and we have this problem that's been known for an entire generation. I mean, in 1991, when Bill Clinton announced that he was going to run for president, he talked about the next generation coming into adulthood worse off than their parents. This is what I grew up hearing. And, then living that reality of having to work harder just to be at the same level that my parents were at this age. And seeing my son now, who's 16, and he's getting ready to head off to college, and he's looking at all these college pamphlets that they're sending him and all the emails they're sending him, and thinking about how am I going to afford to pay for this? And on top of that, he knows that it's not going to be just him going and getting a bachelor's degree. He's got to go to school longer to just achieve the same level of success that we have, which is less than what our parents had. So 2 generations now, and none of the problems have been fixed. All we're left with every election is, would you like things to be a little bit worse or a lot worse? And I want better. I want to make that someone to say, hey, would you like things to be better? So I can say, yes, I would love things to be better.
So we'll come back and have a group conversation right after we talk to our third guest. So thank you, and we'll talk to you in just a few moments. So our third guest today is Sarah Smith. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
And which district are you running for, and who do you represent?
I am running in Washington's 9th congressional district, and we are representative of Bellevue, Mercer Island, where Bill Gates lives, South Seattle, Kent, Renton, Federal Way, and the North Port of Tacoma.
Wow.
Yeah, we have a huge income inequality gap. So South Seattle, because I know you guys aren't terribly familiar, South Seattle and Kent are some of our lowest income earners in the state. And then you have Mercer Island and Bellevue and an area called Newcastle that are some of the highest earning cities and neighborhoods in our entire state. Like I said, I think Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos both live on Mercer Island, or I think maybe Jeff Bezos lives in Medina, but still, these are $4 or $5 million home areas. And then you have places like where I live in Kent, because I don't make $4.5 million for some reason. We bought our house for $227,000 and it was a foreclosure. So you have a huge income inequality gap in this district. It's a really interesting place.
So how did you get involved in politics?
I've always been pretty involved to some degree, but I kind of did that thing that a lot of people did where they were politically not necessarily apathetic, but more removed. So growing up in high school, I helped organize anti-war walkouts, anti-war sit-ins. I helped with voter registration. Excuse me. I've done some op-ed newsletter pieces growing up. In college, I was very active in politics and the Democrats in my college. And I was an appointed CEO or PCO for the, I wish I was an appointed CEO. I was an appointed PCO of the 37th District Democrats. And I've done some volunteer work with the King County Democrats, not too much, but then I also have a lot of volunteer experience because I really like to actually go to the root of the problem. And a lot of that is through organizations. When I was working for an insurance company, I actually was the only non-management advisor on their volunteer organization board. I helped organize King 5 Harvest Drive up here for our company. I organized our company's Seattle Walk for the Animals. I've done a lot of organizing for nonprofits and been very involved in nonprofits. So I actually got a call from brand new Congress and they were like, hey, so someone nominated you in your community to run for office. And I kind of thought about it. I toyed with the idea. I went back and forth and I started reading up on our incumbent, and his name's Adam Smith. We have no relation. And I started reading up on him and I realized we need more than this in King County. We need better than a guy who drags his feet and waits for somebody else to make the first move before he decides how he's going to feel, and who waits until the midnight hour to take action. We deserve better. In a place like King County, where we have Pramila Jayapal repping right next door to us in Seattle, we deserve more than that. And I don't know if you can tell, I have a lot of fire. I have a lot of passion. I have a lot of dedication to people, and especially people in our district and our community. And I decided, yeah, why not throw my hat in the ring to run and bring us a better voice to Congress? Because that's what we need.
How many other candidates are in the race?
Just me and the incumbent, actually. There's always a Republican, perennial Republican, Doug Basler, who always runs. He said he's going to announce, but he hasn't yet. or he hasn't formally filed or anything like that. And I haven't seen anything about him campaigning at all. So I don't know if it's even going to get beyond me and Adam. So by default, I might wind up in the top 2, which is pretty cool.
What was most interesting when we met a couple weeks ago at the Town Hall for Democracy here in Portland was that you had come across similar processes within the Democratic Party that we had here, in that you were denied access to the voter file.
Yes, that's still an ongoing issue. So quick summation of what happened. We asked for VAN access, for voter access network access. We could have data for Democrats in the area and be able to canvass and phone bank and do mailers far more effectively. And we were denied access, but they originally told us it's because oh man, what was their original excuse? I can't even remember anymore. They gave so many. They kind of have been making it up as they've been going along. They said there's a bylaw that prevents us from gaining access to it. And so we said, okay, can we see this bylaw? We're fine with it, because they said we needed to be endorsed by 50% plus 1 of the legislative districts. And we're like, okay, cool. And then we also had to have state party chair approval to access the information. And so I said, all right, fine. Can I see the bylaw? And that's when they kind of freaked out. And we had volunteers calling and asking for it. I called and asked for it. We've had other chairs and other Democratic vice chairs who were calling and asking for it. Legislative districts were asking for it, and they couldn't provide it to us. And then very recently, actually, they decided to walk that back, and they said it was because I was endorsed by brand new Congress, and they also work with Republicans and Democrats, which doesn't make any sense to me, because we poured through my incumbent's FEC filings, as you do, and he's actually made several donations to Republican candidates. So I don't understand why this is the new goalpost we're setting. And there's also, to follow up, not a bylaw about that. So we've been trying to get a good reason why they won't give us the information, but nobody will give us one. And they just keep giving us the runaround. And our state party chair, Tina Podladowski, she's trying to talk to all the chairs, and she's now telling them that I'm not being truthful with what we were told. So I am happily emailing out the receipts and the email chains that I have, and happily sharing all this information, because I'm not making this up. This is too crazy to make up at this point.
Yeah, we had at our first meeting this year, a delegate stood up and under new business said, I move that all undocumented processes be rescinded, and that any new processes be approved by the state central committee. And then someone seconded it, and something was on the floor, and the leadership looked like deers in the headlight. It's like, where's this going? And then we started talking about all the undocumented processes within the Democratic Party. And we get staffers telling people who call up the party, giving their opinions on these processes that are not documented. And some of them are anti-democratic. And that ends up being a reflection upon me as a member of the Democratic Party and me as a Democrat, as a delegate to the state central committee. And so I don't want is policies being put out there that I have not approved or voted on. And I would be perfectly fine if the state central committee had voted on these things and agreed to them, but they hadn't. And so someone in some back room has decided on these things, and they're moving forward. But it turns out that democracy actually works. And the more we talk about this, and the more we talk about the undocumented processes that are being floated, the more people are realizing that this is not the right way to do things.
Yeah, and one of the big things that's come up is transparency. I know we've talked a lot about that. Nomiki Konst had a beautiful, beautiful rant about it, and I'm sure all of us watched and loved dearly. And the fact is, if the Democratic Party wants to overcome a lot of these hurdles that they put up for themselves over the years, they have to be more transparent. They have to prove we're the party of transparency. We can't keep playing this game where we say we're the party for free and fair elections. We want to end gerrymandering and election reform, except if it's in our own party. That's not good enough anymore. It's not going to win new voters. It's not going to win over young people. It's not going to win over anybody in the digital age that likes things being written down. I didn't think we would have to go so far as to start a resolution to say, hey, how about it's mandatory we write things down? But now I guess we've kind of reached that point. And it just seems absolutely egregious to me that that's a conversation we need to have. But if the Democratic Party wants to rebuild trust and win back some of those 1,000+ seats that we've lost since 2008, they need to prove that they can be trusted by people. And the way you do that is just be transparent, be honest, be forthright. It's easy to tell the truth. because when you tell the truth, you don't have to keep a story straight, and you don't have to keep passing on these oral tradition laws rather than, writing them down. You can be trusted. People can point to something. And the first thing this party needs to do, the first thing our party needs to do is rebuild that trust, especially with young people. Millennials are now the largest voting bloc. And they're now also the largest pool of independent voters. And if we want to pull in independent voters, we have to give them a reason to like the party. And I mean, Dorothy mentioned that they bullied out a lot of new blood in some of their legislative districts. They've been doing the same up here. They've been doing the same in legislative districts all across our county. And I just think it's absolutely ridiculous. If we want the party to keep growing, we need to grow with the culture. And the culture is leaning towards transparency. So when you play these games with bylaws that aren't written down, oral traditions that change and goalposts that move, and you can't give anybody a straight answer, that doesn't win people over. And if you want to pull people in, you've got to try and win them over. And the best way to do that is to prove we're the party that can be trusted. We stand behind our values to the point that we will hold our own party accountable to them.
Yep. Well, let's now include the other two members we have online and push the limits of technology today and have a group conversation. So, interesting. So, Dorothy, what are you using for data? Were you allocated data to the from the Democratic Party?
Yeah, so we got our vote builder access before we were endorsed by Justice Democrats in brand new Congress, but they are denying us the caucus data from 2016. They say we have to pay $26,000 for it because that's what it costs the state to operate the caucuses. And like, that's not really how data works, but it's a strange thing, and we can't get a straight answer on it. My campaign manager is actually a state committee woman, and so she's been asking on the the statewide calls that they do on a regular basis for an answer as to why we should have to pay this kind of money for the data and why it's not just included in the vote builder that they're giving candidates. Because I would think if they want to win races, like, they would give us the most recent voter data that we have. And the people who show up to caucus are like, they're energized. They want to be involved. They want to be engaged. They're going to be our biggest base. And we're not going to defeat the Republican incumbent without a strong grassroots campaign, without getting these people involved, because we're never going to out fundraise her. She's going to have super PAC money. Like, she's going to have Koch brother money. And I mean, we have a paper mill. We have a Georgia Pacific paper mill here. So the Koch brothers actually have a vested interest in this district. And so I cannot fathom why they would not just want to give us that data. And I'm willing to pay a little bit extra for it, but I'm not paying $26,000 when they can divide that money by all of the candidates running.
That's the whole point, right? Because grassroots campaigns don't have that much money. The point is to limit your campaign, extract as much as they can from you, so you cannot run an effective campaign, basically. Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that they could, they could put a price tag of $26,000 on it, but they could also make half of that, or 2/3 of that, or 3/4 of that in in-kind contributions, so that your final bill is something a little bit more reasonable.
Well, they've already in-kinded vote builder to us. We actually only had to pay $100 for it.
Wow.
We maxed out our in-kind.
I'd actually like to ask you a quick question, Dorothy. Did you have to be endorsed by 50% plus one of your legislative districts to gain access?
Nope.
Huh.
We just told them the truth, because none of our, like all of our counties, they won't endorse in a contested primary. It's in our bylaws, because we need to, let the primary play out.
Okay.
The voters decide.
I mean, the one thing I also want to mention, too, about what's going on with me is, conveniently, this bylaw is being applied to my race. Adam Smith also just happens to be one of their top fundraisers from big companies, and especially the war industry. He's a war hawk. So he brings in a ton of money because the business of death is booming.
Yep. And he's also gotten $100,000+ from telecom, and surprise, surprise, lukewarm response on net neutrality.
That's my sentiment
That is
exactly, actually.
And it's so hard to point out because when I was canvassing for Sarah, I came across a lot of people who were like, "Oh, why are you primarying Adam? He's a Democrat we trust." And then when I talk about his voting record, he's like, "He's great with refugees." I was like, "He helps create them, if that's what you mean." He's never seen a cluster bomb he didn't love. Voted to give it to Saudi Arabia, and one of the big countries that has egregious human rights violations. On top of that, he voted for the $700 billion Trump budget increase. And we asked him that question in a roundtable, and he basically just dismissed it as if we didn't understand anything. He's like, "Oh, that's just appropriation. That does not mean that that bill is passed." He is disingenuous, and it's hard to convince the people of his voting record. But I am sure the times are changing and people are paying more attention and they'll dig in and see what he has done, I hope.
Well, that's why they have a vested interest in protecting this seat. So it's been kind of fun, but really frustrating.
And it's interesting, it's not protecting it from a Republican, it's protecting it from another Democrat.
Yeah, and someone asked me, like, "Aren't you afraid of splitting the vote?" I'm like, between who? 2 Democrats? And that just blows my mind. Either way, a Democrat will hold this district. So I don't understand what vote we're splitting.
So if you're elected, you're going to be 2 amongst 435 people in the House of Representatives, and unless the Democrats completely blow it again, they should eke out a majority next year. So if you ended up in the majority, how do you envision yourself making progress?
So making progress, one of the good things about running as a Justice Democrat with other candidates like Dorothy is we have a huge slate of candidates that are running together. And, God willing or higher powers willing, if we wind up having enough Justice Democrats in those seats, that's easy. We all agree on the same platform. One of the things that we have to do is we have to have Democrats who are willing to have a spine and to stand up for things and to fight. Go knock on your colleague's office. I will physically bring myself to my colleagues' offices and I will sit down with them if they're on the fence about Medicare for all. I will hammer it out with them. You just have to have representatives that are willing to throw legislation on the table that's powerful and real and actually affects people, and then make an actual point to talk to the constituents of the representatives that are reluctant or wishy-washy or won't sign on. You have to actually be willing to step outside your comfort zone. One of the things with being one of the duties of federal level Congress is you're not just repping your district. You're actually there to fight for the entire nation. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic, but you also have to remember that my duty is to the 9th district, but it's also to all the other Americans surrounding the 9th district. So going out and being present and being a voice, Pramila Jayapal does this really well. She's always out educating. She's always out sharing information. She's always in interviews explaining things to people. She's extremely transparent. We need more representatives like that in office who are going to actually help constituents be educated enough to pressure their Democratic representatives to step up and actually take a risk and to defy their donors and fight for net neutrality. We need to be loud. We need to be obstinate. We need to stop giving up, and we need to refuse to compromise on the things that matter. And that's exactly what I plan to do in Congress. I'm a very fiery person, and I'm excited to bring that to a place that actually needs representatives like that.
Dorothy.
A lot of what she said, but I mean, the big thing we have to do is we have to take on the lobbying industry. We have to make it illegal for them to donate and influence our politicians directly. And that until we do that, we're never going to make any headway. And because they're going to constantly be able to go in and kill the bills that benefit us by simply influencing just the subcommittees, which is only like 15 people. And so it's easy for them to come in and do a little bundling, their little campaign finance, campaign donation magic to get them to kill the bills that benefit the common man. So we're not, like, right now, we are in a place where we are paying taxes without representation. And so we need to take that on, and we need to go in there and be fighters for the people. And that's the beauty, right, of Justice Democrats and Brand New Congress. So right now with Brand New Congress, we've got 2 Republicans running who are committed to taking on campaign finance. And then we've got, hopefully, soon the Justice Democrats, I think, are aiming for about 50 candidates, So even if we just get some of those wins, we'll be able to start influencing, our party in general and saying like, this is how you win, because campaign finance is a nonpartisan issue. It is something that like 90% or more of the public at this point knows that how we are financing campaigns is the reason why we have no influence over our government. And that is the single greatest threat to our democracy, is that right now we do not have one person, one vote. The decisions, everything that is done for the wealthy. And that's why we have massive income inequality and endless war and all of these really stupid decisions that are made based on greed and not based on what is good for humanity.
So, it's been interesting watching the race in Alabama, because as much as people talk about what happened there, the reality is only 30% of the population voted, which means that we don't know how 70% of the people would have voted. We don't know if they're progressive people, they're fair-minded people who just gave up, or if they're all agents of Satan and Satan was having a convention that day. But only 30% voted. And one of the tactics that is being used is that just like in the Clark County meetings, they make the meeting so unpleasant, no sane person would ever want to spend their precious few moments of private life doing that. And yet, what's been so encouraging about what's happened over the past year and a half is that the younger generation has taken this on as a challenge and has not given up. And they're stuck in it. And every time they get pushback like that, it just makes them stronger. So I was wondering if you had any suggestions on how you talk to people to keep them engaged in the fight, to take back our democracy.
You got to give people something to re-engage them. One of the greatest things we can do, and it's bizarre because you can talk to any sitting incumbent and you can say it's good to have primary challengers. And they'll all say, yes, it's great to have primary challengers, but they'll weirdly never encourage primary challengers. But primary challengers are good. Young people are tired of voting for the same people over and over and over again and not seeing their quality of life change or get better. They just see it get worse. You need to give them a candidate that they can actually care about. Look what happened with Bernie Sanders. He energized an entirely new voter base. He brought people back to the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party, instead of embracing this and running with it and working with it and actually keeping these people engaged, pushed back and created a false divide and said, oh, Bernie bros are the problem. That's why Hillary lost. They've created this false sense of divide in these two parties that's going to keep pushing young people out. Young people overwhelmingly supported Bernie Sanders, especially, millennials and Gen Xers overwhelmingly supported Sanders because he was speaking to the issues, things that matter. And we need candidates that are going to be unafraid to come out and talk about the things that matter, that are going to come out and be unafraid to take shots, to actually fire a shot across the bow about things that we care about. We care about Medicare for all. Fire shots at the pharmaceutical industry, fire shots at the health insurance industry. And we do that by doing exactly what Dorothy talked about, by refusing to take corporate money from these businesses, these lobbyists, these special interest groups. When you start to tell people, no, I'm only grassroots, I only take donations from people, their eyes light up when you are out canvassing. They're like, oh, really? And you say, absolutely, because I don't want to represent corporations. I want to represent you. And I mean it. I'm not out, I'm putting my feet to the pavement, and I'm actually committing to that message and that value system. And I think giving people that real candidate, it's not just saying, I'll definitely fight for you, for jobs, I'll fight for access, I'll fight for X, Y, and Z words. They actually are putting their money where their mouth is, quite literally, and saying, I want to represent you by only taking money from you. And I think that's how you re-energize people. Give them something different. Give them something they're craving for, they're dying for, which is a real message and a real platform that affects real people.
Another thing too, I think, note is also campaign voter suppression. Every county with more than 75% of Black population saw their DMV closed. I'm from India. This surprises me. We have a polling booth every few kilometers, every 1.5 to 2 kilometers. That means every mile or so. One polling booth every mile or so. Secondly, there's certain polling booths that are just open for 1 or 2 people. There's one person in Gujarat, he's been voting for around 50 years. That polling booth has been open for 50 years just for that person. So we need to, just looking at a voter turnout as a single thing issue is, I think, a mistake. What we have to look at comprehensively is what can we do to increase participation. We start everywhere. We start from education. We have to reimagine how we do school education, reintroduce civic education. I did not know until my husband told me that civics is not a compulsory subject here in America. It was a part of history for me. I learned how the Indian government, and we need to reimagine education, reinvest in public education. Secondly, we need to look at gerrymandering. Third, we have to look at voting after restoring all rights after somebody has been served their time in prison. Um, because majority of we're putting African Americans in for non-violent offenses, then these people can't vote after that once they've already served their time. That would explain, even though African American men have are at par with the as a percentage of population, they had a lower voting percentage in Alabama. A lot of them are not able to vote because they have just been put in prison. There's a lot of things we can do. Federal legalization of marijuana, that will suddenly open up a lot of people who can suddenly vote. Also, engaging these communities in off-election years, not just going to the black voters when our ass is on the line, when we need. Sorry if I can't say that word. We can't, when we need them, going to them, come vote for us. I don't think that's enough. I don't think it's fair. It's undue burden put on those communities. And when they do come out, because they have the right to not come out, because we didn't seek their vote, we did not earn their vote, then we blame them. See, the black people didn't turn out, the brown people didn't turn out there. So I think there has to be a grassroots revolution, and revolution is not the cult of the bomb and pistol. What revolution means is the current system that is based in manifest injustice must change. So come on the streets, make your voices heard, attend your local meetings, talk about, try to understand the intersection of all these issues, how they come together, how they keep us divided, and actively try to overcome that. We need an educated populace, and now is the time. We need everybody to put in the time to do that.
And Dorothy, you have a slightly different demographic. How do you talk to people to get them engaged?
Well, I mean, a lot of the same things. It's giving them a reason to vote. I mean, that's the thing, is the Democrats are not giving people a reason to vote. They don't have a clear message. They're not listening, and they're perpetuating this elitism, and they're not respecting the fact that young people have valuable opinions, like that we have ideas that can make things better, and that we need that. We need fresh ideas. The leadership of this country has failed for decades, and it is time to change it. It is when leadership fails, you don't promote people from within that same group of leadership. You bring in new leaders. It's what they do if a business fails. If a business is failing, then they fire the executives, and then they don't hire people from within that company. They bring in outside executives to change things with fresh ideas in order to save the company. And that's what we need to do with this country. And the thing that the Democrats also do is they only knock on the doors of people who are identified as Democrats and have voted in the last 4 elections. So they're not even talking to the people who aren't voting, and they're not talking to the people who haven't been identified as Democrats. And in Washington State, we are all non-affiliated voters. We don't register by party at all. So they're only reaching people they've already reached over and over and over again. So they're not knocking on the doors of new people. And so that's we're targeting people who are likely Democratic voters, and we don't care. We don't care if you've ever cast a ballot. Like, we're going to have that conversation with you, because it's going to take an uprising. But the beauty of it is, in order to make change, we only need 3.5% of the population to be actively engaged. And that is enough to reach enough people to make change.
Wow. Betsy, did we have any questions on the line?
There was one for both candidates from Jilly Love 101. She wanted to know their views on Russia, AFRICOM, and nuke energy. Uh,
I'd say I'm terribly familiar as far as Russia goes. I think, you know, Russia, obviously there have been some questions of security with Russia and everything, and we're doing what we can to look into that as a government. We can't do much more than what we're already doing, so I think we need to just let whoever's investigating it, whoever's working on that, just do their jobs. But people, I mean, Nina Turner said it point blank, the people don't care about Russia. They care about whether or not they can turn their lights on. They care about whether or not they are going to be dying in the streets from cancer because they don't have health care. They care about whether or not they can ever get out from underneath their student loan debt. They care about whether or not net neutrality stays neutral. They care about things that affect their daily lives because we're too exhausted to care about all these other security threats. We're too tired. We're too indebted. We've been fighting too hard for too long. We can't care about things like Russia as much as we want to. I know we should. Everyone knows we should, but we just can't. And we don't have that luxury. And I'm sorry, but it's a privileged position to care about Russia the way that some of our representatives are doing. Adam Smith is constantly hammering away about Russia, constantly talking about Russia, almost never talking about Medicare for all, almost never talking about climate change, never talking about education, not the things that actually really affect people. So it is a privilege to be able to have that be your top concern, because I worry whether or not my husband and I are going to be able to pay our mortgage every month.
Dorothy, do you have any comments on this?
Well, I mean, I definitely agree with the stuff on Russia. I mean, I think there's mostly financial collusion. This was a whole lot of just trying to get around sanctions. And I know, like, they want to be able to sell drilling equipment so they can drill in the Arctic. And that's, I think, ExxonMobil makes drilling equipment that they want to be able to sell. And with the sanctions in place, they can't. And so that's a lot of what's going on here behind the scenes. And that's nothing like, and yes, anybody who's involved in that should be arrested and put in jail, but we don't seem to jail white collar criminals. So it's probably not going to happen. And then I just Googled AFRICOM. So
the honesty is real. Transparency.
Yeah. So it is what I thought it was. I guess they're talking about our actions in Africa. In Africa. And in that case, we need to stop. We need to completely rethink our foreign policy. It has been a failure. We are engaged 13 countries officially and counting. That seems to keep going up. And it's not doing us any good. It's not fixing any problems. And a lot of these issues are because of generations of colonialism and oppression on Africa, on the Middle East. And what we need to be looking at is how we can help them develop sustainably for the 21st century in whatever way that looks for them. It won't necessarily look the same as what we consider, development, but we should be engaged just in humanitarian ways in helping them develop in a sustainable way so they're not dependent on fossil fuels, and allowing them to benefit from their own resources instead of robbing them of their resources, because that's what all of these conflicts are about. All of these conflicts are about going in and taking advantage of these people and taking their resources and their wealth away from them. And we need to stop.
Exactly.
What we do in America is what we are doing throughout the world. We are taking from the poor and giving to the rich, and we are using our massive military to do that.
Yes, I actually got introduced as the anti-war candidate not too long ago, and I was very excited. We need to straight repeal that authorized use of military force.
Yep.
That needs to be repealed yesterday. We need to repeal that sucker, because right now it's in the hands of an incredibly unstable man, and it's taken away one of the primary powers of Congress, which is the power to debate and declare war. That's why we're involved in 13 other countries. I remember when we heard about the 4 men who were killed in Niger, Congress didn't even know. They didn't know that we were even in Niger. And that's their job. That's one of their core powers. A repeal of the authorized use of military force is one of the only ways we're going to be able to take the power back and stop the expansion of the military-industrial complex. It will not happen until we take that back and we restore that power to Congress.
Mm-hmm. We
Well-
also need to repeal the rule that allows the executive branch like 90 days of action before we even start debating it. That's not written into the Constitution. The Constitution clearly states that Congress has the power to declare war and peace. And the reason for that is the reason that our founding fathers put that in that document was because they did not want the executive branch to have that kind of power. Because kings had been doing that. Like they had been getting their people involved in these conflicts for their own personal gain to build up their own, their own stockpiles of wealth. And that's what they're doing here, right? They're putting our people's lives in danger, and they're harming civilians, innocent people in these countries so that they can become wealthy. And more wealthy, right? I mean, they're already wealthy. It's so that they can have even more wealth. They're hoarding gold in their, in their treasury. And that's what they want to do. And that's harming people. So we absolutely, Congress needs to take back its power.
Well, amazingly, we have now spoken for an hour. I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and I wish you the best luck in the upcoming election. And Suprit, awesome work at the ground level that you're doing. Is there any short messages that anyone would like to say before we close out?
I would just like to say one more thing, that we cannot let three people decide the future of internet for the rest of us. We cannot let one person decide where our kids go to war and then refuse them healthcare when they come back. Be involved now. Let's take our power back, and let's take control of our future. It's our future. It's time we start making decisions about it.
Yeah. And my short message to people is
Vote Sarah Smith.
obviously vote Sarah Smith. Yes, I know a lot of viewers are definitely in Oregon as well. But if the thing I say every single time, the revolution starts with us. The best advocate for your progressive value system is you. So show up to your legislative districts. If they try to push you out, refuse, stand your ground, hold on, because eventually you're going to hit a point where you're going to be that member. You're going to get to cast that vote. You're going to get to elect your chair. You can fight back. That's what we've been doing in Washington slowly. We've been trying to take over executive boards with real progressives. We've been trying to make sure we're putting progressive people in these positions. The best thing you could possibly do is, if you don't want to run for office, or it's never been something you're interested in, become a member in your local legislative districts. Have that power, that voting power. Your vote is your voice. I mean, Suprit mentioned, it's not a fight of pistols and bombs. It's a fight with votes. We can win. That's all the power. That's all of our power. So show up to your legislative districts, get involved, vote, run for office. If you've been toying with the idea, whether it's water commissioner, city council, mayor, or congressman, if you have been considering running for something, do it. Run for something, because we need people to be bold and stand up. We can't wait for someone else to change the system for us. It's been proven for decades it will not change if we don't change it for ourselves. And we can do it. We can do it together and support each other by building coalitions like these.
Thank you so much. So for upcoming events, just a reminder, on January 6th, we have the nomination convention for Senate District 19 in Portland. On January 13th, we have Suprit's Town Hall for Progressive Democracy, focusing on housing and homelessness. That is between 5 o'clock and 8 p.m. In Renton, Washington. And you can find out about that event by going to Our Revolution and looking on the events search page, and the details of that will come up, and details about registration. And then we have the platform convention of the Democratic Party of Oregon coming up on March 17th and 18th. And look out for a video that I'll be making shortly, which talks about the process and what happens that weekend, so you can mentally prepare yourself and get excited for the event. So thank you for joining us today. Progressive Oregon is taking a holiday break, so our next program will be Sunday, January 7th, 2018. Great news about additional programs. So Progressive California launches on January 7th, and then Progressive Washington also launches in January. So
next
we're going
week,
to have a
hopefully.
wall. Next week, awesome.
Next week.
So we're going to have a wall in the Western United States of progressive live stream broadcasts. And finally, if you haven't emptied your pockets of all of your spare change, You can always donate to Progressive Oregon at progressiveor.org. You can also help support the creation of programs like this by Uphill Media. Uphill Media is a nonprofit 501c3. So if you itemize your taxes, you can deduct your contributions there. And that's at donate.uphillmedia.org. Thank you so much. Happy New Year, and see you in January.
And I'm going to break in here just to say, Dorothy, did you want to get a last few minutes? Because we can go.
Yeah. I mean, to kind of play on what Sarah said, it's just, get involved in whatever you can. And I know that it sucks to walk into these Democratic Party meetings, but they have so much power and influence that we cannot continue to let them control the narrative. We have to get in there. So if you have the stomach, and you can be tough and you can get in there and you can face down these bullies, please do. Please get involved. We need you. And for the Portland area people, we are right across the river, just across the bridge, headquartered in Vancouver.
Yes,
so if you're interested in helping out with this campaign and helping us swing this district, you can go to our website, dorothyforcongress.com, and sign up to volunteer. We'll contact you and let you know what's happening. And also, keep a lookout on TYT's Rebel Headquarters interview I'll be on the 27th. And Sarah, I think, will be on the 28th.
Yeah, I'm on the 28th. That's
yeah. So, and they're interviewing pretty much, I guess, all of us, all the Justice Democrats, throughout the month. So if you want to hear from what we all have to say and really get excited and energized, because these candidates are amazing. They're we're all passionate. We're all running from the heart, and we're all really working to make this a better place.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I just want to, we're going to go out with a song that Betsy and I picked earlier, because I thought we needed to have some lady songs, right? This has been a power show of women. And so we're going to go out with Jill Sobel's Our America Back. It's a local artist, I believe, in California, U.S. anyway. And I just want to say that if we could win an Emmy, the content that was just provided in this hour would win one. This was phenomenal, and I urge everybody that's watched this program to share it, because what you just heard was some of the most phenomenal political discussion and honest truth from representatives that I have ever heard, and I've been doing this a while. So thank you all. I was impressed. You wanna take us out, Larry? Didn't mean to kill you.
Once again, Happy New Year, everyone, and see you in 2018.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
Remember the Garden of Eden, before Eve hung out with that snake. You could walk down the street, not worry about thieves. All the kids could go trick-or-treating. Then those foreigners started coming in, like the Germans in 1790. Then the Irish arrived, the potato blight. The neighborhood started changing. Life was better, we lived right. Life had a paler shade of white. When they say we want our America back, our America back, our America back. When they say we want our America back, well, what the fuck do they mean? Island, and that statue we got from the French. Well, that horse still alerting with strangers she's flirting, inviting them into our beds. The guineas, the coolies,
country back.
People are pouring over the borders, pouring.
Let's speak American.
They're not sending their best.
We've come to take our country back.
Before the gays had the agenda, before the slaves were free.